You ready? All right, that's Brother Chris Hannon, Grace Baptist Church, Bloomingdale, Georgia, Sunday school lesson. We're in the book of Isaiah. We're in chapter 24, and we've looked at previous how the Lord's judging Israel and Israel's, those that are helping Israel, and he's isolating for judgment. And in chapter 19, we looked at the burden of Egypt. Chapter 20, we looked at some things concerning the Assyrian, and then the burden of the desert in chapter 21, and the burden of the valley, chapter 22, the burden of Tarshish, chapter 23, and now we're looking at the Lord and the pronouncement against the world as a whole, because we know when the Lord deals with Israel, he's dealing with not only Israel, but the world at large. My wife and I was talking on the way to church this morning, and there's a lot of angst going on about, our war efforts over there with Israel to, finally just, bring an end to Iranian being the sponsor of worldwide state terrorism. And everybody knows it at this point. All the other countries know it. We know it. Intelligence bears witness to it. And the fact that they were rapidly getting a nuclear capability would be very bad, not only for that region, but for the world at large. And so, Southern has, either sit back and previous administrations, we've given them money. Obama gave them billions of dollars, actually sat down on a tarmac, crates of billions of dollars. He did that. That was actually done. I thought it was a hoax, but that was actually done. Biden released all their frozen assets that were over there. And as soon as they get that stuff, you'll see an uptick in terrorism, because now they can fund people. They say, oh, we're going to be done. We're just seeking nuclear power for our country, for our people, so we can have good energy and everything else. But the intelligence shows that the way what they're seeking and what they're trying to buy throughout the world, that's not what those things don't mean nuclear power. Those things mean nuclear weapons. And the fact that they don't want any UN coming in and looking at it, no, they continue for years and years, barred people from coming and looking at it. If you're doing the right thing, you know what? You don't have to hide. But if you're doing nefarious stuff, you're going to have to hide it, right? And again, people forget. It's like this stuff is so. Somebody was saying how Iran's doing this. No, this has been going on. The people that are here in the country celebrating the death of the Khomeini guy, all those people tell you this is going on for 47 years, that their country has actually been held hostage by these radical Islamic people. And I'm old enough to remember in the 80s when these people came to power and started doing all that kind of stuff. And if you want to do some history research, go online. You can get it now. Go online and look at Iran, formerly Persia. Look at it, and look at that. And remember the Jews, as far as them and Israel. Go back to the 70s and look at what they looked like. That country, who they were friends with. And look at it in the 70s, and it will surprise you what they had going on in the 70s and how accommodated they were for Israel and the U.S. But people, what man learns from history? Doesn't learn from history. And everybody just forgets. But let me tell you something. To that Jew, October 7th it's like everybody forgot October 7th. And October 7th is okay. No, October 7th wasn't okay, was it? No. And except for Trump coming in and making a peace deal, those, say what you want to, them hostages would still be there. So understand, when the Lord deals with Israel, he's going to deal with aspects of the earth at large. So that's why he says, now we're in Isaiah chapter 24, he says, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty. All right. And now this is, again, it's primarily talking about Israel and their land. And he's going to put them out of the land. And if you know the history of Israel, when he said, when you mess up, I'm going to take you out of the land. You're going to go into the land of your enemies. When you get yourself right, when you get your heart right, I'll bring you back. And so this is why the Jews were out of the land. And then all the Arab countries, who do they send in there? They sent the Palestinians in there, right? Because that is the Jews' land. Okay? Everybody wants to say, peace and everything else. Well, I'm going to ask you something. If you had land as your inheritance and somebody squatted on it when you were away, and then all of a sudden you came back to live in that land that was your inheritance, would you share it with them? You'd be like, yes, get out of my land. And oh, by the way, why were those group of people there? You know what them group of people were there? Why they were there? Because they were so violent that nobody wanted them in their land. They got plenty of land. Y'all see the size of their countries? They got plenty of land, but nobody wanted them in the land, so they put them there. And when the Jews came back, right, little by little, Balfour Declaration, World War II, gave them back the land, right? Understand? That was a worldwide effort that did that. And so you wouldn't want nobody to do that to you, but it's amazing how the news media and pundits play on people's ignorance. And it's amazing to me that Christians, professing Christians, don't have a biblical understanding of what God is doing. Because I was telling my wife on the way to work, I said, because now, you know, we got a bunch of pundits. On my job now, the prevailing thought is that United States and Trump are in the pocket of Israel. We're just doing Israel's bidding. Trump is under Israel's thumb. He does anything that Netanyahu does. You even got some of these conservative pundits saying, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, they're all saying this. That's why you don't hear from them much. They kind of fell off because they're the Jews, and they keep citing the Jews are doing this. And in the black community, when you grow up, you hear that several things about the Jews. They got money. They run things because they got money. They got Hollywood. They got this. When you hear names like Stein, Berg, what else? Steen, all these things, we know, oh, that's Jews. And then when I had somebody at the job tell me this right there. They came up and said, hey, man, we heard that you sold your son the truck. Why don't you just give it to him? They said, and I said, because I can do with what I want to do with my stuff. And I said, I'm teaching them financial thing by making them buy it instead of giving it to them and everything. Well, he said, if I had a truck, I'll give it to my son. I said, that's your business. And they said, man, we didn't know you was part Jew. So when you deal like that, now it's Jew. You understand? So that's the outlook on Jews. And so it's easy to disseminate this information on social media and everything else. And in the black community, they just eat it all up. Because nobody has no biblical understanding of how God even operates. None. Zero. Their understanding is given to them by the mainstream media. And let me tell you something. If you can't see that they're crooks and charlatans and twist everything just by what they're doing with Trump, they're never going to do anything this man does. They're always going to try to find some bad light to put it in. Anything. You know, you talking about envy and when everything, it's like Jesus Christ. You know what they said about him? I mean, he's definitely healing people, no doubt about it, right? But so what did they say? They said he's healing people by Beelzebub. Wait a minute. He's doing what? These are literal healings, but he's healing them by Beelzebub. That's why Jesus Christ goes into and says, well, who your children do it by? He goes, therefore they should be your judge. He said, well, how are they helping people? Who's helping them? And he shows how, but when somebody hates you, you can do nothing good in their sight. It's like here it is, when couples divorce, it can be on both sides. That mama will picture that daddy that he did nothing. Did nothing and can do nothing right. Or the dad can do it to the mama. Same exact thing. I don't care if it is. Well, they helped me with my homework. They probably did it wrong. I mean, everything they do is going to be getting in a bad light. And if you can't see, the media does that to rile you up. And of course, in the black community, you know that they always got that card, racism. Throw it out there. And then they twist, they make racism. I mean, they go to some mind-bending things to point out racism in things. You're like, well, somebody had a banana. They were eating a banana. They could have eaten an apple. They could have eaten an orange, pomegranate, but they chose a banana. Why did they choose a banana? You're like, I don't know. Is this a joke or something? You gonna tell me? Because everybody knows that when you want to disrespect black people, you eat a banana. Never heard that. Never understood that. You know what I mean? So, but they throw that out there, and they'll say that's microaggression. I mean, they just come with crazy stuff. And so, again, you got to be careful where you get for information from. And as a Christian, this is right here, this is the standard of truth. Now, not no news media, I'm not conservative or otherwise. It is not the standard. This is the standard of your truth and understanding about, and this will give you understanding about the world beyond the news headlines. And oh, by the way, a headline, all that is to get you to read it. Because somehow they can word it in some kind of crazy way that you'll be like, wow. And then when you actually read it, it's something totally different. You'll be like, yeah, they call it clickbait. So now they can turn into advertisers and say, look, I got 1,000 hits on this. 1,000 hits on it. Advertising, man, that's 1,000 people viewing that. So, I'll give you this and so. I got 10,000 clicks on it. Something stupid as all get out. But as long as they can get clicks on it, people pay money. Isaiah 24, the Lord, watch what he says. He said, behold, the Lord maketh the earth empty, and maketh it waste, and turneth it upside down, and scattereth abroad the inhabitants thereof. It shall be as with the people. All right, now watch this. Everybody's going to be affected. Look what he says. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, and with the servant, and so his master, as with the maid, so with the mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so as the borrower, as with the taker of usury, so with the giver of usury to him. So everybody, I don't care high, low, whatever vocation, everybody's going to be affected by it. And brethren, by the way, you know what happens? When sin came into the world, it affected everybody. Right? And then when situations arise in this world, you know what? I know we're Christians. I know God, and I know Israel's the apple of his eye and everything else. But when situations arise, you know what? We're not going to be exempt. Sometimes I think Christians, you know what? We think we got this like, a little halo around about us, and we're going to be kind of exempt because God's watching us. God does watch out for us. Amen? But we're not going to be exempt to some of the things that happen in this life. Right? Pain, sorrow. I was thinking about it. I said, when you start seeing Old Testament patriarchs and everything else, some people went blind in older age. Is that right? Did Isaac go blind? Were the promises of God with him? But it didn't keep him from going blind. Right? And you got prophets going blind. You got, in the New Testament, Paul said, I think it was Trophimus, he said, I left at my leader's sick. I mean, you see the same things that happen in the world, right? And it's because of sin is in this whole thing. And because sin coming in the world, everybody's, partial to it are going to be, affected by it. The world. So notice everybody. Look what he says. Verse 4. The earth mourneth, and fadeth away. The world languisheth. Now the word languish means a person or living thing losing strength, vitality, growing weaker or feeble. And that's what happens when you old age. You can take care of yourself, but that's what happens, right? Now watch this. He says, the earth mourneth and fadeth away, the world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. So everybody's, I don't care who, there's some people, they high and lifted up, but you know what? You can't escape the judgment of God. Watch what he says. The earth also is defiled. Now, particularly, he's talking about Israel, all right? And he's talking about Israel. And again, once Israel affected, it affects the whole earth. So he's talking about Israel, and it's because he reiterates, because you know what they did? They transgressed his laws. And he's going to be talking about this land. That's why I started talking about the land, because it's very important. That land, now I ask you something. Really and truthfully, when it comes to land, who owns all the land? He's the maker of it, so he owns it all. Man, is the best we can do with anything is rent. That's what we're doing. We're renting. Everything you got, you renting. Because you know what? Your expiration date is earlier than that. People still living in houses like was built in 1902. But the people that built the houses, they're not here. Structure is still here. They're not here, so we're renting, right? Look at this. He says, verse 5, he says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. Notice, under the inhabitants thereof. So the earth is defiled because of the inhabitants. And everything, the Bible tells in the New Testament that everything became subject to sin because of Adam and Eve's transgression. Is that right? Right? All the animals, all that kind of stuff. Remember in the Garden of Eden, they didn't eat each other. That wasn't until they got out, Genesis chapter 11, when they come out of the flood, then the diets changed. But prior to that, nobody was eating each other. That's why somebody said, well, how did you get all those animals on the ark? Because they didn't act the same way. The lion's going to eat straw like in the millennium. The lion and the lamb are going to lay down, and the lion's going to eat straw like an ox. Well, that's what their diet was prior to sin coming into the world. Sin is destroying. It's defiling. It's degenerating. Now watch this. He says, the earth also was defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because, this is talking about Israel, they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. All right, and he goes into some things. But I want to talk to you specifically about Israel. All right, now go, if you will, to go to Deuteronomy chapter, well, first, because it's concerning the land. Go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 clearly tells us that I would think that the Creator is the owner. Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. Genesis 1:9 says, and God said, let the waters that are under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let, there it is, there's earth, dry land appear, and it was so. Verse 10, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of waters called he seas, and God saw it was good. Amen? So God made the earth. Is that right? That's what he made it. So when you make it, it's yours. When you make it, it's yours. Man's fighting over something, instead of thanking God for what he allows him to do on it. Nope. It's all God's. Look at, so go to Genesis chapter 12. In Genesis chapter 12, and that Jew specifically is under that covenant that God made with Abraham because of the land. Genesis chapter 12. Look at this. Genesis chapter 12 and begin at verse 1. All right, Genesis 12:1 says, and Abram went up out of Egypt, and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot, that's 13. Genesis 12:1. Now, the Lord has said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, here it is, unto a land that I will show thee. And we know that's the land of Canaan, is that right? Because the Canaanites were there, right? All the Canaanites. Now look at chapter 13. Yeah, go to chapter 13. Let's see, go to verse 13, 14. 13, 14. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. All right, so look all around you. He says, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give, and to thy seed forever. Do you see that? Well, the covenant is with the land, right? And it's God's land, right? And if you mess with God's land and defile it, you know what God will do? He'll take you out of that land. So he says, verse 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, there shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land, and in the length of it, and the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abraham removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. All right, so we know Abraham believed God concerning this land thing. Is that right? Sure. Go watch this. Go to Genesis chapter 15. Genesis chapter 15, start verse 7. Genesis 15, 7, and we'll read to the end of the chapter. He says, and he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. and said, and he said, Lord God, whereby shall I know I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, take me an heifer of 3 years old, and she goat 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against the other. But the birds he divided, divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcass, Abram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And lo, the horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and shall afflict them 400 years. Have you ever heard people talk about slavery in America? They was like, and somebody said 400 years one time. I was like, that's impossible. We're fixing to celebrate 250 years. Then they said, no, it's 200 years. I was like, that's still impossible. That means all of us would have been slaves. I was like, you just come up with just the craziest thing. Then they go, oh, well, if you go back and, talk about this and add it, so we got to add it up. No. And it's just mind-blowing when you just say racism and add that to people. They believe and suck up anything. You want to do it? Watch this. Do a test for yourself. Ask somebody, especially I love one of a friend that you know is all into this black, worshiping their blackness. Ask them how long slavery was. They're gonna tell you something like 100 years. Someone will even say 200 years, and you're like, 200 years. Yeah, I said, you know how old the country is? And then they'll be like, oh, well, and you'll be like, this is how brainwashed people are. That all you have to do is put a little racism in front of them, and they just believe anything and don't even think it through. So watch this. He says, and also that nation, verse 14, they shall serve, will I judge. And we know that's Egypt. Is that right? And he says, and afterward shall they come out with a great substance, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation, so we're going to stay there 4 generations. He says, the fourth generation, they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. That means what they're doing in that land, God says, it's not warrant for me to remove them right away. And by the way, when they went down to Egypt, you don't understand. God was using Egypt to take care of them. How did they get down to Egypt? Remember, how did they all get down to Egypt? There was a famine where? There was a worldwide famine. Y'all remember that? Joseph's dream, 7 good years, 7 bad years, right? And the 7 good years going to be eaten up by the 7. And God said, God did this so prepare to save y'all alive. So everybody come down here and he put them in the land of Goshen. That was God's plan. That's why people don't understand God. And so when I say as a black man, I say, well, God's plan may have been to get us here to this country so we could get the gospel. And they go, you mean slavery? Yes, you mean slavery? You mean, yeah, you slavery? You mean what the Bible says? You understand? But people don't understand because they don't know how God operates. God is not limited to anything. But watch this. He says, verse 16, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river Egypt, I said down from the river Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaims and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites. That's who's in the land. He said, all those people's land you're going to get. Okay? So he says, so when you read about this and understand that, and if you was to go back in your Gazette and see the mass of that land, it's way more than they have right now. Way more than they have right now. Now watch this. Go back to Isaiah. But what happened was, notice he says this right here. Verse 5, Isaiah 24:5 says, the earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. You see that? So when God put them in that land, he said, you know what, there's certain rules and restrictions associated with this land. Almost like bylaws. Or not bylaws, what's that? HOAs. You buy this. I mean, your name's on the mortgage loan. You paying the taxes. You paying the taxes. You doing all this kind of stuff. But somebody else tell you get the what. HOAs. I mean, they can't tell you what color you can paint your house. Now I know the thing behind it is you don't want people coming in, having to make your neighborhood looking all trashy and stuff like, having a couch on the front porch or having old cars sitting out in the yard and everything else. And all this kind of stuff. We had somebody way down around the curve, and if you go down there, they just basically got their front yard like I don't know. It's basically their front yard, okay, is what you would see in somebody's backyard. So they got chairs and tables out there. It's not bad looking stuff, but it's in the front yard, okay? I don't know if his backyard is too small. I don't know. But in the front yard, and he's got had a little kiddie pool, but it had, I don't know, I think it had fish in it or something like this. And it had an arch, right? And all this is like sitting in the front yard. And some people, you get on the Hunter's Ridge neighborhood thing, and people talking about it, all this kind of stuff. I think he had some flamingos out there, Now, y'all know back in the day, flamingos in the front yard was a thing. Did y'all ever have did y'all grow up with people with flamingos in the front? Lion heads, flamingos was in the front yard. Y'all remember that? Yeah. And you think about flamingos, there ain't no flamingos in this country, but we had them in the front yards. But having said it, the land belongs to God, and when you defile God's land, and Israel was told that. He was told that. And I say what you want to, we inhabitants, notice one thing he says about it, he says, because they have transgressed, notice, the laws and changed the ordinances. And this harkens to Romans chapter 1, where God says, they changed God's truth into a lie. And the worshipers served the truth. And because they did that, God gave them over to what? A reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient. And you can tell what they're doing comes from a reprobate mind. I don't know if I told y'all, but the process by which they're calling it innovative and what do they call it? Innovative and all this kind of stuff. You always these nuances when they do these sex changes, especially from a male to a female. Y'all know what that is? That's the same process. I'm talking about the exact same thing, but they call it a different name. Same process that they use for serial rapers to castrate them. They call it chemical castration when they're doing it to these serial rapers. But when they're transitioning a young person, they got all these nuanced names for it. And somebody found that out and started saying it, and they kept saying, don't say that, don't say that. No, let's tell it what it is. It's not some new nuance, the innovative thing that they come up with. It is old, and it was for criminals. And y'all so reprobate that y'all are doing it to children. And permanent, it's permanent. There's no coming back from that. There's no growing nothing back. No, this stuff is insane. Y'all realize it? It is absolutely insane. And so Israel getting kicked out of there. Now go to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28. This is lengthy now. Deuteronomy chapter 20, we're going to be reading verses 1 through all the way to 63. And basically, this is a kind of a guide to Israel. Said, all right, this is what's going to happen. You get into the land. Now, the book of Deuteronomy is the second, what we call the second giving of the law. So it gets into some details. And so, the book of Leviticus covers all the Levitical stuff, the feasts and their duties in the temple and everything else. But basically it breaks down to what God said was going to happen when they came into the land. All right, so he says, Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 1, he says, "It shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth." And this is, now the Jew, this is the promise they would look for. And this is what they thought the Messiah was supposed to come and do. Make them head of the nations. Okay? That's why Jesus Christ is supposed to be what? King of the Jews. Is that right? But when he comes, what does he do? He reproves them. They're like, and so they get mad because they're like, they think in their mind they holding the line. But what have they done? They've changed the law. They've perverted judgment. Is that right? Sure it is. That's what he told them they did. So he's got to bring in spiritual righteousness, because the law didn't bring in spiritual righteousness. Right? And they couldn't see that and understand that the law made them all guilty. And you know what? They should have been praying for mercy. But no, they tailored the law. They tweaked the law. They used the law to their benefit. And they used it to get gain. They used it to manipulate people, to hold it over people. He says, remember one time he said, the law, he said, they've made it a burden. That's why Jesus Christ says, "Come unto me, all you labor and heavy laden, and I'll give you what? Rest. Take my yoke," because their yoke was heavy. "My yoke upon you, and learn of me. I am meek and lowly. You shall find what? Rest unto your souls." Because they wasn't getting rest under the law. It was every little thing that they was doing. Even that, remember the washing of plates and cups and all this coming, and they're getting so detailed in it that it became a burden. And again, the law, what? The law was supposed to show the holiness of God. It never was supposed to make you right. Right? Now watch this. He says, and again, they're looking for Christ to come in and make them head of the nations. Verse 3. I'm going to have to stop right here because this is really lengthy. Well, let me just for sake of time skip. Those are all the blessings all the way down to verse 15. Now go to, look at verse 15, and we'll read detail next week. Go to verse 15 of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Because this goes along with our text in Isaiah 24. Look what he says. He says, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe, to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed shall be in the city, and cursed shall be in the what? That's the land. Field. He says, cursed shall thy basket and thy store. Cursed shall be thy fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy land, and the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Cursed shall thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shall thou be when thou goest out." He's talking about battle. You going out of battle. He says, "The Lord shall sit upon thee cursing, vexation, rebuke, and all that thou settest thine hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, until thou quickly perish quickly because of the wickedness of thine doings, whereby thou hast forsaken." Verse 21, "The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, and until he hath consumed thee," where? "From off the land." You see that? This is what he's talking about in Isaiah. He's talking about the earth, off the land. I'm taking you off the land. Look at verse 33. Jump down to verse 33, Deuteronomy. He says, "The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up." That's what we've seen in the book of Judges. Is that what was happening in the book of Judges? Gideon was threshing some wheat, hiding some wheat. Why? Because when the harvest came, who came down with the harvest? What's that group that came down with the harvest? Every time they watch Israel, they have sent spies out there and say, "Harvest time," and they all came. Remember it said they came down and said that the camels were like the sand of the sea for number. It was a Midianites. Yeah, the Midianites came down. Y'all remember it says they were like the sand of the sea. All right. Let me see. I'm looking for land. Go to verse 63. And I got to stop here. Verse 63. It says, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good, he says, and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked, here it is, plucked from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it, right? Because that's what the covenant was between Abraham and God. Is that right? Was the land, okay? And then furthermore, God made a covenant when he circumcised him, a spiritual thing. Now, but notice it's the land. And then when Israel's affected by that land, you can't tell me when that thing, the conflict and everything happens, you can't tell me the world is not affected as well, because we're seeing it. We're seeing it. It's about Israel staying in that land. And it's about who's trying to remove them. The Iranians are trying to get them out of that land. And they're trying to get them out of the land by their proxies. And that Iran has not been satisfied with just having their own land become extreme Muslim or what do you call radical. Now they want to ship it abroad. That's what they were doing. They were shipping it abroad. Yes, that's why they were just, now we're going to put this stuff abroad. And that's why they came in. And the Khomeini's came in because they were seeing their people get more Western. Let me tell you something. Y'all know what Persia was? Y'all think Persia was Muslim? Wasn't Muslim. Anybody know what it was? What a bunch of countries were. What do y'all think? Catholic. Catholic. That's why when you hear over there Christians, what they really mean is Catholics. And then they came in, the mullahs came in and changed everything. And next thing you know, generation of young people are from your youth up. When you go to school, some of the first things you learn in rhymes and speeches is the death of Israel. As a little kid, 3 years old, that's what you're learning when you learn how to read and write. So it's over and over and over and over. So you grow up thinking that, and you know, all kind of things. They got tails, they got all this crazy stuff. And you grow up thinking that, and then you come to the United States, and you see the United States prospering, and the United States is their friend and everything else. Then you go, what in the world? Why do you think all those people are here? A lot of people are when they escaped during the takeover and got out of that country. Huh? Yes. And so understand, but you got to understand how God operates. God will judge his own because that's his land. Is that right? All right. Well, we'll get into some more next week. Take a break.